Good morning everyone and welcome to the class. We are doing the chapter The End of Bipolarity, and under this chapter we have discussed about the features of the Soviet system. We have also discussed about the defects or loopholes of the Soviet system, and then presently we are discussing the process of disintegration, the events of disintegration of USSR, the timeline of the disintegration of USSR. And in this regard, we have seen that actually the process has started from the military intervention of USSR in Afghanistan in the year 1979. And this military intervention caused so much financial burden on USSR that it became really difficult for USSR to sustain that financial burden. And then we see that in the year 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev becomes the General Secretary of the Communist Party of USSR, and he starts reforms in the system of this जो Soviet system था. He starts reforming that Soviet system, and all these reforms were focused on mainly two things. One was openness, and this second was restructuring, which is called glasnost and perestroika. Perestroika is restructuring and glasnost is openness. So he started to open the economy, he started to restructure the economy, because he was very much knowing what is the problem of the system, and accordingly he started to reform the system. And one more thing was done by him, that was the process of democratization was also started, because we have seen that under the USSR, under the Soviet system, there was a complete absence of democracy. And this process of democratization was also started by Gorbachev. And then what we find that the Baltic republics, three republics are there: Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So in these three republics, what we find that first started the struggle for freedom. It was started first in Lithuania, and from Lithuania it spread to Latvia and Estonia. And these happenings were of the year 1988. Okay, so earlier also there was a protest of the people against the communist regime in these countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. But earlier, what was the process? What was the method adopted by USSR? That it suppressed the protest. But now, what we find that when in 1988 this protest of the people started in these republics, there was not any kind of effort from the communist regime of USSR to suppress this protest. And consequently, what we find that the communist regime started to be uprooted in these republics. Like first of all, it was in Lithuania, and in March 1989, this Lithuania becomes the first republic of the USSR to declare its independence. And in the meanwhile, some other developments were also taking place, like in 1989 October, what happened that Soviet Union declared that Warsaw Pact members are free to decide their own future. They are not compelled to be bound by Warsaw Pact. They can leave that pact. Then in the same year, in November 1989, what happened that Berlin wall जो था वो गिर जाता है. तो that was that Berlin wall was a division between East Germany and West Germany, and that was the symbol of the ongoing Cold War between the US and USSR, and the fall of Berlin Wall was symbolic of the end of this USSR, of the end of this Cold War. And then again we see that in February 1990, what happens that this process of democratization, which was started by Gorbachev, it comes to next step. And under this step, what was done by Gorbachev, that the 72-year-old single party system was abolished in USSR, and it becomes a multi-party system. So these were the developments taking place. And then we see that in June 1990, what happens that Russian parliament also declares that now it is independent from the Soviet Union. So first of all, Lithuania became independent, and then we see that in month of June 1990, Russia declares its independence from USSR. And as we know, Russia was the largest, was the most powerful republic of USSR. So its declaration of independence from USSR had a great impact on the future of USSR. And then we see that in the year 1991, Yeltsin becomes the president of Russia. And so Boris Yeltsin was the head of the Communist Party in Moscow. In 1985, when Mikhail Gorbachev became the General Secretary of Communist Party of USSR, he appointed Boris Yeltsin as the head of the party in Moscow. And then we see that when multi-party system was adopted in USSR, and then Russia declares its independence from USSR, then what happens that Boris Yeltsin left that party, Communist Party, and he contests the election from other party, and he becomes the president of Russia. So in this way, these changes were taking place. And in the meanwhile, what happened that in September 1991, there was an attempt of coup. There was an attempt of coup by the Communist Party hardliners. These Communist Party hardliners were against the reforms which were started by Gorbachev, the reforms which were aimed at normalizing the relationship with the Western countries, the reforms which were aimed at the process of democratization, the reforms which were aimed at restructuring of the economy. All the reforms were actually against the main ideology of socialism, and that is why socialism and communism, and that is why the hardliners of Communist Party, they staged a coup against this Mikhail Gorbachev. But what we find that this coup was not successful, and in this process, what happens that Boris Yeltsin becomes the hero of the people. There was a very great degree of increase in his popularity, and all this was happening. And then we see that some new developments. That was the last development, we can say, in December 1991. What happened that it's December 1991, Russia, Ukraine and Belarus, these three countries decided to end that treaty of 1922. through that treaty only this USSR came into existence. Okay, so in December 1991, these three countries, Russia, Ukraine and Belarus, decided to end that treaty. The Treaty of 1922. After the revolution of Russia, the Russian Revolution, which happened in October 1917, after that revolution, this USSR was created through a treaty in 1922, isn't it? And that treaty was annulled by these three main countries. These were the most powerful countries, Russia, Ukraine and Belarus. These three countries decided to annul that treaty, and that treaty was ended. And then after in this way USSR ended. इस तरह से end होता है. And after the end of USSR, one new organization was created which is called CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States. This Commonwealth of Independent States was established, and members of this CIS were Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Because as we have discussed these things, these 5 Central Asian countries were the most financially weak countries. Not countries, these Central Asian republics who were the part of USSR, they were the weakest republics of USSR. So after the disintegration of USSR, the most badly affected republics were these 5 republics of Central Asia: Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. है ना. ये 5 जो थे, इन पर सबसे बैड इम्पैक्ट हुआ. तो इन पर वो मतलब उस इम्पैक्ट से इनको बचाने के लिए इट वॉज वेरी मच इम्पॉर्टेंट कि एक फिर से एक लूज, नॉट लाइक दैट यूएसएसआर की तरह सेंट्रलाइज नहीं, बल्कि एक लूज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फिर से क्रिएट किया जाए. एंड दैट इज वाई द CIS was created. And other than these 5 countries of Central Asia, other countries were also there: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, then Georgia also joined it. Okay, and in this way we see that this USSR comes to an end and Russia becomes its successor. Successor means कि whatever USSR का जो भी liabilities थी, जो भी उसके asset थे, everything was transferred to Russia, and in this way it becomes the permanent member of the Security Council, and the nuclear weapons were also handed over to Russia. इस तरह से ये एंड होता है. और एक्चुअली अगर हम देखें तो फिर से एक और इवेंट है 25 दिसंबर 1991 का, जबकि ट्रीटी से को तो ख़त्म हो गया, USSR तो ख़त्म हो चुका था, तो फिर जो प्रेसिडेंट थे गोरबाचेव, वो रिज़ाइन करते हैं सोवियत यूनियन से, और इस तरह से सोवियत यूनियन का एंड होता है. दिस इज द एंड ऑफ द USSR. So these are the main events which we have discussed, and now we will see the causes. What were the causes behind the disintegration of USSR? Actually we have discussed already, we have discussed the causes, but now we will sum it up. अभी हमने सिर्फ उसके फीचर्स पढ़ा, उसके लूप होल्स देखे, उसके इवेंट्स देखे, एंड इन दिस डिस्कशन, इन ऑल दीज डिस्कशन actually we are discussing the causes as well, but separately एक एक पॉइंट करके हम उसको लिखेंगे और उसके बारे में समझेंगे, ताकि चीज़ें बिल्कुल भी किसी तरह का एम्बिग्यूटी न रहे. एवरीथिंग शुड बी क्लियर. सो नाउ वी कम टू द causes of disintegration of USSR. Causes of Okay, so the first cause. First of all, the most important cause we can say for this end of USSR was the economic cause or economic factor. And now this economic factor can also be broadly divided into two subtopics or two, not topics, two sub points. Okay, the first is economic pressure or burden was there, economic pressure, and the second is stagnation in economy. So first of all, we will discuss the pressure on the economy. What was the pressure on the Soviet economy? देखो, प्रेशर का मतलब ये हो रहा है कि खर्चे बहुत ज़्यादा थे यूएसएसआर के. If we consider some points, we can understand it very easily. First of all, what we find that it was a superpower. It has to equate itself with USA. And in order to equate itself with USA, it had to spend a lot on nuclear weapons and many other weapons and arms and all. Because उसको compete करना था ना, उसको US से पीछे नहीं होना था, US के साथ या US से आगे जाना था. तो ये जब कंपटीशन वाली चीज आ जाती है तो फिर अननेसेसरी बर्डन आ रहा था इकोनॉमी पे कि उनको ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा आर्म्स पे खर्च करने. आर्म्स रेस चल रहा था. वी हैव डिस्कस्ड इट व्हेन वी वर डिस्कसिंग द फर्स्ट चैप्टर. वी हैव सीन हाउ दिस कोल्ड वॉर लेड टू द आर्म्स रेस. तो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस आर्म्स रेस देयर वाज heavy pressure on the economy of Soviet Union. And if we compare both the system of not the system, we can say both the countries, US and USSR, what we find that US got independence in the year 1776 and Russia was under the autocratic rule of Tsar, and it through revolution it became free of that autocracy of Tsar in the year 1917, and then in 1922 USSR was formed. So there was huge gap between the condition of these two countries, but they were at the same place. दोनों की पावर्स हमें बराबर दिख रहे थे, बट एक्चुअली इकोनॉमी पे जितना प्रेशर यूएसएसआर के था वैसा प्रेशर बिल्कुल भी नहीं यूएस पे था. तो आर्म्स रेस के कारण प्रेशर था, वन रीजन. द सेकेंड रीजन व्हाई देयर वाज प्रेशर, the reason for this pressure was the satellite countries. Satellite countries जो होते हैं वो होते हैं ऐसे countries जिनका अपना कोई existence नहीं होता. They don't have their own existence, they just know to move around, just like satellites. Like our Earth is a planet, and the planet Earth has one satellite, natural satellite, and that is moon. So moon का क्या है? Moon has no existence in its own. It just revolves around the sun. Sun जहाँ भी है वो उसके चारों तरफ ही घूमेगा, उसका अपना कोई existence नहीं होता. In the similar way, what we find that during this Cold War era, these satellite countries were there who were blindly following their respective सुपरपावर्स. तो ऐसे अगर इनके लिए हिंदी में जो टर्म यूज होता है दैट इज नोन एज पिछलग्गू. पिछलग्गू जो आपके पीछे लगे हुए हैं, आप जहां भी जाएंगे वो आपके पीछे 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 आपके वो हमेशा साथ रहेंगे. दे विल बी ऑलवेज देयर टू सपोर्ट यू. आप सही हो, गलत हो, मॉरल हो, इमॉरल हो, कोई इट डजंट मैटर, दे विल बी ऑलवेज विथ यू. तो अगर ये सैटेलाइट कंट्री से आपको इतना सपोर्ट मिल रहा है कि वो हमेशा आपके साथ है, तो in order to get that support, what will be the requirement? The requirement will be to give them some financial aid whenever they are in need of any kind of aid. They will ask these superpowers only, and the superpowers have to give them, have to satisfy them. तो यूएसएसआर के लिए एक प्रॉब्लम थी, क्योंकि जो सैटेलाइट कंट्रीज थे उनके जो नीड्स थे, फाइनेंशियल नीड्स, उसको भी उसे फुलफिल करना पड़ता था. एंड देन वन मोर प्रेशर वॉज देयर, एक और जगह से प्रेशर आ रहा था, वो था सेंट्रल एशियन रिपब्लिक्स, जिसके बारे में हमने पहले भी डिस्कस किया है. कजाकिस्तान, ताजिकिस्तान, उज्बेकिस्तान, तुर्कमेनिस्तान, ताजिकिस्तान, दीज आर द 5 कंट्रीज, है ना. इन पांचों कंट्रीज जो थे उनको, उनकी इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन काफ़ी बैकवर्ड थे, दे वर इकोनॉमिकली बैकवर्ड. तो ये जो बैकवर्ड कंट्रीज थे, इनके कारण क्या होता था, बैकवर्ड रिपब्लिक्स विद इन द यूएसएसआर, इनके कारण इनको भी तो साथ लेके चलना है, तो फिर इन पे जो था वो बहुत ज़्यादा खर्च करना पड़ता था यूएसएसआर को. तो ये भी एक प्रॉब्लम का रीज़न थे. नाउ आई एम राइटिंग द नेम्स ऑफ दोज 5 सेंट्रल एशियन रिपब्लिक्स, क्योंकि बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट तो नहीं कहेंगे इसको, बट यू शुड रिमेंबर द नेम्स ऑफ these countries. Okay, so this is Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and one more is there. This is Tajikistan. These all 5 republics, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they all were Muslim countries, Muslim republics. Okay, तो इनका भी जो था फाइनेंशियल बर्डन जो यूएसएसआर पे आ रहा था. तो these were the 3 reasons for economic burden, for economic pressure on यूएसएसआर. इन 3 कारणों से यूएसएसआर के ऊपर इकोनॉमिक प्रेशर आ रहा था. तो इसको हम लोग, इन तीनों रीजंस को, इसके जो पॉइंट्स बन रहे हैं इसके अंदर, इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर के अंदर इकोनॉमिक प्रेशर के अंदर फिर से हम बताएंगे कि किन किन कारणों से प्रेशर था. फर्स्ट, आर्म्स रेस. सेकेंड, फुलफिल द financial needs of satellite countries. Burden of backward Central Asian republics. So these are the 3 reasons for burden. Now we come to the next factor and next reason, next sub point under this economic factor, and that is economic stagnation or stagnation in economy. We have discussed about this also. इसको भी हमने पहले डिस्कस किया है कि इकोनॉमी में स्टैग्नेशन क्यों आ रहा था, बिकॉज द इकोनॉमी वॉज क्लोज्ड, completely closed. There was no trade relation with the western countries, or trade relation was there, but only with the communist countries. Not other than communist countries, they were not having any kind of trade relation. Then the most problematic reason was that backwardness in technological backwardness was there, because whatever technological advancement was taking place in the Western countries, USSR was not aware of all those technological advancement, and that was causing a lot of disturbance, we can say, or that was causing of its lagging behind the Western countries. It was not able to compete with the Western countries. And then we see that because the system, the institution of private property was also abolished, and because of this absence of private property, we see that everything was in the control of state. The whole economy was state controlled, planned economy was there. The role of the state was very big, and this role of the state makes the system made the system highly corrupt. Bribery and corruption, all these were very natural in a state controlled economy. And all these कहीं से बाहर से सामान का आना जाना नहीं, बाहर से टेक्नोलॉजी का आना नहीं, स्टेट का कंट्रोल होना, प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टी का नहीं होना, that also becomes a reason for a stagnation, because in the absence of the institution of private property, what happens that people lack motivation. तो ये सारे रीजंस मिलकर के इकोनॉमिक को स्टैग्नेंट बना देते हैं. यूएसएसआर इकोनॉमिक प्रॉब्लम्स में आ जाता है. जिस रेट से इकोनॉमिक को ग्रो करना चाहिए, बिल्कुल भी ग्रोथ बंद हो जाती है. एक तो एक तरफ इतने सारे प्रेशर हैं उसके ऊपर इकोनॉमी पे, दूसरी तरफ इकोनॉमी में ग्रोथ नहीं हो रहा है. यहाँ तक कि जो कंज्यूमर प्रोडक्ट्स थे उनका प्रोडक्शन काफ़ी लो हो जाता है यूएसएसआर की इकोनॉमी में. नॉट ओनली दिस, फूड ग्रेन्स तक इंपोर्ट करने पड़ते हैं लास्ट में यूएसएसआर को. ये कंडीशन हो जाती है यूएसएसआर की. तो दीज ऑल आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ यूएसएसआर. तो यहाँ पर हमने इकोनॉमिक प्रेशर को और स्टैग्नेशन इन इकोनॉमी को वी हैव डिस्कस्ड. एंड नाउ वी कम टू द नेक्स्ट फैक्टर, एंड दैट इज political factor. What were the political reasons for the disintegration of USSR? So now we will see the political factor or political reasons for the disintegration of USSR. Political factor is that the government was highly authoritative. The government was highly unaccountable. And because of this authoritative and unaccountable government, it was not able to fulfill the aspirations of the people. And when we come to the when we try to understand the reason behind this unaccountability, behind this authoritative form of government, what was the reason behind it? The reason was single party system. Because of single party system, what happens that the ruling party is completely free of worries. It has nothing to fear, because because the people have no option. People are going to cast their vote and they don't have any option. They will have to choose from the same party. There may be so many candidates, 4 candidates, 5 candidates, 7 candidates. Any number of candidates can be there in a particular constituency, but all the candidates will belong to the Communist Party. It also happens कि many times कि कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी के अलावा और भी पार्टीज हैं, लेकिन all the parties are affiliated to communist party only. तो it's a single party system. चाहे आप इस कैंडिडेट को वोट दे, चाहे आप उस कैंडिडेट को वोट दे, the party is the same. So it makes no difference. And that is the reason the government became totally authoritative and unaccountable. It has nothing to do with the demands of the people, with the needs of the people, with the interest of the people. And in this way, what happened that the people became highly dissatisfied, and they started to compare their position with the people who were there in the Western countries and Western democratic countries. What was the difference between these two people? So all these started to cause dissatisfaction among the people. So we will continue with these discussions in the next class.